What do you do when God feels far away? Think about that carefully. Because almost every believer experiences this question at some point. You pray. You wait. You search for peace. Yet somehow, God feels distant, silent, unreachable. And maybe that feeling creates fear. Because when heaven feels quiet, people naturally wonder, did I do something wrong? Has God forgotten me? Why does faith feel harder right now? If you've ever felt that way, you're not alone. Many people in Scripture experienced seasons where God felt distant too. Think about David. Some of his prayers sound deeply honest. Confused, desperate. He cried out asking where God was. He wrestled emotionally. Yet Scripture still describes him as a man after God's own heart. Think about that carefully. Feeling distant from God did not disqualify him spiritually. And maybe that matters more than people realize. Because many people assume strong faith means never struggling emotionally. Never doubting. Never feeling disconnected. But biblical faith was often honest about human emotions. Now here's something important. Feelings are real. But feelings are not always reliable indicators of reality. Think about the sun. Clouds can block your view of it. Yet the sun still exists even when you cannot see it clearly. And maybe spiritual life works similarly sometimes. Emotional exhaustion, stress, grief, disappointment, burnout. All of these things can affect how connected people feel spiritually. That does not automatically mean God has disappeared. Now let's talk about one reason God can feel distant. Noise. Modern life is loud. Constant notifications. Constant distractions. Constant pressure. People rarely sit still long enough to reflect deeply anymore. And perhaps many people are not lacking God's presence. Perhaps they are overwhelmed by competing noise. Think about Elijah. He expected God to appear dramatically, in powerful displays. But God spoke through a still, quiet voice. That story matters. Because many people expect God to move loudly while ignoring quieter moments of reflection, conviction, wisdom, and peace. Now consider another difficult truth. Sometimes pain changes the way people experience God. A painful disappointment. An unanswered prayer. A heartbreaking loss. These experiences can create emotional distance. Not because God moved away, but because pain changed trust. Think about that carefully. Pain can make people guarded spiritually, even if they do not realize it. And perhaps someone listening has been carrying disappointment with God for longer than they admit. Maybe life unfolded differently than expected. Maybe prayers remained unanswered. Maybe healing took longer than hoped. And slowly, distance formed. If so, remember this. God is not threatened by honest emotion. Scripture is filled with people expressing confusion, grief, frustration, and questions. Faith was never meant to be dishonest. Now here's another reason people sometimes feel distant spiritually. They mistake emotional intensity for God's presence. Think about that carefully. Some seasons feel emotionally powerful. Other seasons feel quiet. But emotional intensity is not the only evidence of spiritual reality. Healthy relationships experience different seasons too. Some moments feel deeply emotional. Others feel steady and quiet. Yet quietness does not automatically mean absence. And perhaps mature faith learns to remain steady even when emotions fluctuate. Now let's talk about what to actually do when God feels distant. First, remain honest. Do not pretend. Do not perform. Talk to God honestly about what you feel. Many people try to hide emotions spiritually. But honesty creates space for healing. David prayed honestly. Job spoke honestly. Many faithful people brought real emotions before God. Second, remain consistent even when feelings fluctuate. Think about that carefully. Feelings change constantly. But consistency builds depth. Many people abandon prayer, scripture, or community the moment they feel disconnected. Yet sometimes faithfulness matters most during quiet seasons. Not because it instantly changes emotions, but because steady roots grow through consistency. Third, examine what may be exhausting your soul. Some people are spiritually drained, not spiritually abandoned. There is a difference. Burnout affects perspective. Stress affects focus. Emotional exhaustion affects clarity. And perhaps what some people need is not condemnation, but rest, stillness, renewal. Now think carefully about this. Some of the deepest spiritual growth happens during seasons where people cannot rely entirely on feelings. Why? Because those seasons force trust to mature. Think about a child learning to walk. Eventually the parent steps back slightly. Not to abandon the child, but to help growth develop. And perhaps silent seasons sometimes work similarly. Not punishment. Development. Now let's address another fear many people carry secretly. What if God stopped listening? Think about that carefully. Many people feel ashamed during distant seasons. They assume struggle means failure. But Scripture repeatedly shows God remaining faithful even when people struggled emotionally. Peter doubted. Thomas questioned. Elijah became exhausted. Yet God still met them compassionately. That matters. Because God's faithfulness is not dependent on human emotional perfection. Now maybe someone listening feels spiritually numb right now. Maybe prayer feels difficult. Maybe scripture feels dry. Maybe faith feels quieter than it once did. If so, remember this. A quiet season is not necessarily a dead season. Roots grow underground before fruit becomes visible. Invisible growth is still growth. And perhaps God is still working in ways you cannot fully see yet. So the real question is not, why does God feel distant? Maybe the real question is, what might this season be teaching me about trust, faithfulness, and deeper dependence? Think about that carefully. Because some of the strongest faith develops during seasons where people learn to keep walking even when emotions feel uncertain. And maybe God's presence has been closer than you realized all along. If this message encouraged you, subscribe to Grace Unseen for more hope-filled biblical truths, deeper meanings, and timeless wisdom from Scripture. And before you go, leave a comment below. Have you ever experienced a season where God felt distant? Your story may encourage someone else who is struggling through the same thing right now.